Now, I will fully start off this video by saying Borderlands 3 does not have an ideal endgame. There are only 3 true raid bosses within Borderlands 3, Wotan, Scourge, and Hemovorus the Invincible with DLC 6. Now, when you Google how many raid bosses there are in Borderlands 3, the first result on Google is 17? With a link to a video that shows Captain Haunt on the list? Alright, that's not what this video is about, but when I was doing research, well, you know. What this video will be talking about is how Borderlands 3 almost, keyword almost, created the perfect endgame. Because even though I think Borderlands 3 lacked endgame by not including any raid bosses or slaughters in any of the DLCs except the last one, they did add some ideas and mechanics to the franchise based off of community feedback that I think should be expanded upon. One of the main ones I'll be talking about is the true takedown switch that was even added to the Proving Grounds. Now, the reason I think Borderlands 3 is not in the same realm as Borderlands 2 to many players who play the game in terms of satisfying endgame are the following reasons. We got to get this out of the way. Let's just put the list up on the screen. The mayhem mode's not satisfying. The loot pools and dedicated drops are still wonky. There's a lack of true raid bosses, mainly standalone raid bosses. The Guardian takedown, being only one of the 2 takedowns, is extremely slow paced, and remember when Maliwan takedown first launched with Mayhem 4, it was also considered very slow paced by most of the players. So with the negatives out of the way, let's talk about what I think would have been perfect endgame for Borderlands 3, and basically, you know, my suggestion for Borderlands 4 at this point, because they're probably not going back to Borderlands 3 anymore. And this starts with the true takedown switch added to the raids. Now, this was actually a community added feature because when the Maliwan takedown first came out, before Mayhem 2.0 and all that Mayhem modifier nonsense, it was too difficult for most players before all the power creep made the game easy. And for about a month, they lowered the scaling and difficulty of the takedown so many players could enjoy it. Now, the community actually loved the decreased difficulty, but the small minority of nerds, such as myself, found it a bit boring and we wanted that increased difficulty back. Now, I forgot if this was an event for like a month or they added it and they were saying it was gonna be permanent. I don't really remember. But what ended up happening, given that a large majority of the players enjoyed the decreased difficulty, while at the same time the true endgame grinders such as myself wanted the normal scaling back, Gearbox came to a middle ground by adding a true takedown switch. And this true takedown switch doesn't affect any dedicated drops within the raid. And I think this is an amazing feature that really only increases the number of ways you can play the game. You want an easier run tailored to your build without save edited gear, run it in scaled takedown mode. You want to slog through an unreal grind to truly test yourself? Put it on true takedown mode. You have a for fun build that's, you know, it's really fun, but it's not as strong as a perfect endgame loadout. Put it on scaled takedown mode. Or you got perfect YouTuber gear like none other and just want to test how fast you can speedrun the hardest difficulty in the game, hit the switch and turn on true takedown mode. This feature ended up being so popular that they added it to the Proving Grounds as well. And now you have YouTube videos with 350k views claiming that the Proving Ground bosses are raid bosses, which again, they're not. They're just not. Like, they don't have any raid boss features, just bloated HP. But the fact that a lot of people actually agreed with this video proves how successful this switch is in terms of the perception of endgame. So that's what the switch did right. Now let's talk about what the switch did wrong, or maybe I should phrase this as what the switch could improve upon in Borderlands endgame. Basically, what could we add to the switch for Borderlands 4 to make this a much better feature? And number one is I think this switch could replace Mayhem mode entirely if the game had normal mode, TVHM, and then UVHM, as well as a true takedown switch on top of it. We could scale the games based on actual difficulty, not relying on Mayhem modes, OP levels, or Chaos levels, which so many players dislike and really only bloat the HP of enemies, which isn't really, it's kind of artificial difficulty to me. Like, where's the new moves? Where's the more ultimate badasses, which we're going to talk about next? This could help replace those features entirely. And number two is, this isn't really a problem exclusive to the Switch, but I just want to talk about how we never saw ultimate badasses or super badasses return to the game like they existed in BL2 and even TPS. Now, like I said, this is really a problem with BL3 in its entirety, that there's no super or ultimate badasses, but I think BL3 if anything, should have gone way further on this little mechanic to bosses and added something like invincible badass mobs, which obviously wouldn't be true invincibles, but it's just an idea that could add insane difficulty for those that want it inside of the mobbing, and truly test your builds if you want to press the switch. And this also helps out the first point as well when it comes to difficulty scaling and removing mayhem modes. Now, the next thing we got to talk about is obviously the takedowns within Borderlands 3. The number one problem with these takedowns is the implementation of them. Now, most diehard Borderlands 3 fans who still play Borderlands 3 over BL2 to this day will argue that the Maliwan takedown is probably the most fun endgame content across all Borderlands games. And personally, I pretty much agree. The Maliwan takedown is some of the most fun endgame content ever. Even on launch, when many players hated it, I enjoyed slogging through it, and it was so satisfying after playing for 3 days straight when I finally got my first raid completion on Zane, the worst Vault Hunter at the time, and it became easier after that once I learned how to do it. However, many players dropped Borderlands 3 around the time of Maliwan Takedown and Mayhem 4, and of course it was due to a lot of builds getting nerfed at the time, but it was also due to the pacing and implementation of this takedown. It's definitely fun and can be fun to complete for the first time ever, like I said, but for a lot of people it was just rage-inducing and they quit the game without ever completing it. I happen to remember on a Bordercast they mentioned that only a small percentage of players were even able to beat this takedown within the first couple weeks or month of it being out in the game. And I've touched on this point in a previous video comparing Maliwan Takedown to the Guardian Takedown, because even the BL3 diehards who say Maliwan Takedown's some of the best endgame content ever, a lot of those same players do not like the Guardian Takedown and they refuse to run it. I mean, let's just compare some speedrun numbers. If you're a god tier gamer like Garwood, you can speedrun the Maliwan Takedown in a frickin' minute using all the glitches possible. But even before he was using crazy car teleporting glitches that are patched out of the game now, he was still posting times under 3 minutes, you know, without the crazy map skipping glitches. But his fastest ever Guardian takedown on his channel, as far as I know, abusing every glitch available to him, was 13 minutes. Now, for an average player with a really optimized build, they can run the Maliwan takedown in probably about 10 minutes. But that same player will take 40 minutes on the Guardian takedown. The pacing between these two raids is wildly different, and I think it's the main factor in players' perception of these takedowns. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to cue the Randy Pitchford tweet saying, if you're a farmable boss person, you're going to have to be patient or move on. Sorry, I can't give you any more of my time. Now, I don't know what it is with Gearbox and their ideals when they're making this game, but when your community likes something, expand upon it. We just spent the earlier part of this video talking about the true takedown button, which, let's be real, that was a feature based on the community, and it was wildly successful to the point that those buttons are now in the proving grounds, and people are boasting that there are more raid bosses in the game than there truly are. So why is it that Borderlands 2 had wonky dedicated drops, TPS launched without them, Borderlands 3 launched without them, Wonderlands launched without them? I don't know why Gearbox hates farmable bosses. Anyways, back to the takedowns. This is relevant because of the pacing. Because at the end of the day, we really need another button in there that lets us skip to the raid boss without doing the whole takedown. Now, my idea is make it so you have to complete the raid in full once before the raid boss skip is available to you. This is a reward. This will give players the motivation to go through the takedown so that they can then skip to farming raid bosses. This is such an important feature for the future of Borderlands because a person like me and many BL3 diehards claim that the Maliwan takedown is some of the best endgame content throughout all of the games. But it's possible we may never see takedowns again. The majority of the community did not like them, and that's just a fact. A large portion of the community dropped off after the Maliwan takedown in Mayhem 4. But if the entire community knew, hey, after I beat this takedown once, I can just skip to the raid boss and I can go farm their dedicated drops, people would be hopping into 4-player lobbies to complete the raid and then go back to solo to just farm the raid boss with their boss melting build. And this is a kind of reward that we can add to it to increase that player retention and increase the replayability. Now, I had another idea that if you do complete the raid as an added bonus, you know, if you don't skip to the final raid boss, let's say you do the whole raid, add another bonus chest, like a little room with bonus chests in it, or a spawn for bonus chests with extra chances at the dedicated drops of the raid. Once again, rewarding you for doing the whole thing. Now, like I said, this feature is not only important to retain players, but it's just a reward in and of itself. If you do the raid once, you're rewarded with a raid boss skip that lets you go farm your dedicated drops. It's a reward system that not only keeps players interested, but in reality, you're just giving people more options for playing the game, similar to the true takedown button switch. And to keep players interested, you need the most amount of options to play the game as possible. Now, with all of this out of the way, for the last little final section of this video, let me tell you what I think the perfect Borderlands 3 endgame would have looked like, because it's pretty simple to me. The perfect Borderlands 3 endgame would have simply had no Guardian takedown or Maliwan takedown as their own events, but instead a takedown in each of the 4 main DLCs. DLC 1 with a Hyperion loader bot takedown, DLC 2 with a horror theme takedown, DLC 3 with a Western theme takedown, and you know, Salvador could have came back, and DLC 4 with a fantastical takedown made from Krieg's mind, where we could have seen some more anointed bandits. Like, where did the anointed go? Just because the story end, we never fight them again? And all of these takedowns would need all the stuff recommended in this video. True takedown buttons for the difficulty scaling, and buttons to allow you to just skip to the raid bosses after completing them for the first time. On top of that, after the main content cycle is over, we could then have standalone raids added into Headhunter style packs, extending the life cycle of the game that I think players would have gladly paid for if all of the features that I mentioned in this video were possible from the start. So that's going to be it for this video. Be sure to drop a like on it and subscribe to the channel. Come check me out on Twitch, because I have been streaming Borderlands 2, the pre-sequel, and I plan on playing some BL1, all before Borderlands 4 gets announced, which a lot of people think it's getting announced this year. We've been having tons of fun with the community over on Twitch, so come join. But I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm out.